Hey everybody, this is Steven from PopCultureMaven.com, and we're back with this week's new comic book reviews. It's a pretty good sized week, folks. So let's just get going. So first up, we have 10 Years to Death one shot, written by Aaron Douglas with artwork by Cliff Richards. Now, this is one of those. Aftershock's been doing a lot of these oversized one shots, and they're actually kind of nice because it's a self-contained story, and it just has a beginning, middle, and end, so you don't have to pick up multiple issues, and they're actually pretty reasonably priced for I think what you're getting most of the time. And this one, while I will say in a lot of respects the story is pretty basic and you've kind of read it before, it's very akin to like Shawshank Redemption and Stephen King. That's obviously there. You can definitely tell the influence there on Douglas's script, but what what it is there's this one prisoner that's just like, he kind of runs the prison, he's like the big gun there, and all the guards are afraid of him, and then all of a sudden this one day this new guard shows up, and this guy's deathly afraid of him, and they can't figure out why, and he'll look at people and just kind of have this like stare, and everybody's scared of him, even the other guards. And so there is a reason for it, and once again you see it in the end, which I will not spoil here, that it's a Twilight Zone episode, and that's where it kind of lands. And I wouldn't say it's the most amazing thing I read, but it's a good story. I enjoyed it while I was reading it. The one thing that is really nice is Cliff Richards' artwork is actually really nice here. It does a good job of capturing it because it's mostly dialogue and stuff like that, so there's not a lot of action. And if an artist can do that, that's all. For me, it's always a win in that category. I think it's worth checking out. I enjoyed it. I wouldn't expect. I wouldn't expect you to think it's like the most amazing book you've ever read. But I think if you're looking for a one shot and a one and done sort of thing, it's not bad. Next up, we have Batman versus Bigby, A Wolf in Gotham #1, written by Bill Willingham, with artwork by Brian Level, who does the penciling, and Jay Leaston, who inks. Now, this is a bridge to the new Fable series that's coming out next year. So this is kind of a primer, for people who are not familiar with Fables. The only thing, if you haven't read Fables, I wouldn't say that this for me was a good gateway to Fables in a sense, because it's definitely more of a Batman story, at least in this first issue. Bigby really is not in it. Bigby, the character, and it's not really explained, here because he's not in it that much, that he's the sheriff of Fablestown. And so what it is there's a wolf, apparently a wolf that's killing people in Gotham. And, Batman's trying to, figure it out. And then that's the basic premise that, we have in this first issue. It's kind of a setup. Like I said, I was a huge fan of Fables. I always say Fables is the one book that you can give non-comic book readers, and it's a perfect gateway comic because everybody knows Fables, like Pinocchio, Snow White, and all that kind of stuff. The Big Bad Wolf example. And you could just, and the way Willingham told the stories was really unique and just entertaining. I think that's why I wasn't particularly as overwhelmed with this first issue. I think if you kind of come from Fables and Fables really well, I think it's going to be a little disappointing. But I will say that this first issue is definitely set up. So there's a lot that will go on from here. It's just that this first issue is kind of like okay. I was a little underwhelmed, but once again, I'm looking at it from a Fables point of view. As a Batman story, it's actually pretty decent. Once again, it's pretty basic, but it's a first issue, so we'll see where it kind of goes from there. Level and Leaston's artwork is actually pretty nice. It was an interesting style, but it actually fit it really well because it's kind of a gritty feel. But it was definitely unique, and I'm not in a bad way or anything. It was just kind of a little different for me. But once I got into the groove of the story and everything, the artwork worked out really well. So I would say, it's not a huge recommendation. But once again, it's the first issue, so I can't quite say where it's going to land. I think the next issue is definitely, it's going to really have to, like, where are we going with the story and how does Bigby really fit into it beyond that we know he's the big bad wolf. Next up, we have Human Remains #1, written by Peter Milligan, with artwork by Sally Cantrino. Now, the basic premise of this story is that there's these aliens or monsters from another dimension or something. It appears that they're from another dimension. And if you show, heavy emotion, like you go out, like the opening sequence is the guy's really frustrated because he can't, have, out loud emotions, runs outside, yells, and the creature just like kills him. So that's the basic setup for this. And we see how life was before, this all started to happen. So it's an interesting concept. It's kind of, it's an invasion type story. So that's the basic premise you have here. And Milligan is actually a good writer. I think that the concept is really not necessarily unique, but it was good. And he does a good job of like introducing, the main characters, because there's a couple getting married, and it appears that they're going to be the main part of the story, as we can tell from this first issue. It was rather interesting. I think it's paced really well for a first issue. It does a really nice job of setting things up, and it gives me enough to like, oh, hey, I want to read the second issue and see where it goes. Cantrino's artwork's actually really nice. It wasn't, I wouldn't say it's super flashy or anything like that, but it gets the job done. And, we do get to see the monsters. So she does a really good job of, bringing those to life and everything. The artwork's good. It's not amazing, but it's good. But I did really like the book. It was kind of intriguing, and I'm intrigued to see where Milligan takes it from here. Next up, we have Deathstroke Incorporated #1, written by Joshua Williamson, with artwork by Howard Porter. Now, this is the best way you can kind of describe it. It's kind of like a Suicide Squad type thing, but there's only Deathstroke and Black Canary right now. It appears that there might be more, heroes and villains coming, but in this opening. So what it is Slade has come to the rationalization that he's not sure if he wants to be a bad guy or a good guy. That's kind of the basic setup here. So there's also this kind of, kind of underground thing, kind of like a Suicide Squad, but not the Suicide Squad. And Black Canary has been sent in by the Justice League to kind of figure out what's going on, why is Slade involved with this group, and all this kind of stuff. So that's what we have as the basic setup here. It's kind of like, it's like Suicide Squad. It's the best way I can describe it. So Williamson does a nice job of setting everything up. But I think it's one of those, this book isn't bad, but it's very by the numbers. There's nothing that like shocked me or like felt was really new and exciting and different. And in that respect, it was kind of disappointing. I don't think it's bad. It's just that, like, I've read this before, and it didn't seem like Williamson really brought a lot of new to the table here. Porter's artwork is really nice. Really big fan of his. I loved his work on Scooby Apocalypse, which was really, really good. And he does a nice job here. He draws a really mean Black Canary. If you can draw Black Canary, it's kind of a win. He draws a nice Deathstroke, too. But overall, I don't think there was really much meat here on the bone. If you're a big fan of Deathstroke and Black Canary, then you're probably going to dig it. But otherwise, it wasn't particularly overwhelming. Next up, we have Inferno #1, written by Jonathan Hickman, with artwork by Valero Shiti. And so I've tried so hard to read these X-Men books. I love the X-Men. I really like the X-Men. But since Hickman has taken over the book, every time they come out with one of these like new #1s, or like this is like, I think, a mini series, I really, the problem is, if you haven't been reading X-Men, you're going to be basically kind of lost here. And has been the problem with these books since Hickman has taken over. Every time they do like some sort of relaunch, it's like I know these characters. He does explain these characters and all this stuff, and the story is there. There is a basic story there, but you ultimately feel like you've been dropped into the middle of a story. Like there is this story, but there's all these surrounding stories that you're not necessarily familiar with, and that's the struggle I keep having with these books. It's certainly not bad, but I feel like kind of lost while I'm reading it. And that's kind of where I've struggled with all of these books, and this one is no different. It's not bad. I just feel like I'm missing something because I don't know what's kind of going on outside this particular story, because there is story threads of other things surrounding it. I will say, Schiti, Schiti, artwork is actually nice. It does a good job. It does, he's able to capture the dialogue scenes. There's some fights and stuff like that. It's nice and everything, but ultimately I can't really, if you've been reading X-Men, I think you're going to love this. If you haven't been reading X-Men, I can't say that this is really a good place to start. So that's where this ends up. Next up, we have Sandman Lock and Key number 2. And we also have Sandman Lock and Key number 1. Why do we have both of these? Well, Sandman Lock and Key 1 came out so long ago. I want to say it came out like in April. I mean, it's been like 6 months. It seems like it's been forever. So fortunately, recently I was going through some stuff and I found the first issue and I'm like, well, I better set it out because I know the second issue is coming soon, and it did. So I had to sit down and read the first one again because I remember some things from it, but certainly not that much in the way that Joe Hill. Oh, by the way, it's written by Joe Hill with artwork by Gabriel Rodriguez. And Neil Gaiman is a consultant on it. He did oversee checking the script and everything for the Sandman parts. So what it is you have the Lock and Key family have basically entered the DC Sandman universe, which includes Sandman, includes Lucifer, includes Cain and Abel, the House of Mystery. And what it is her brother's trapped in hell and she's going to go get him. And that's the setup from the first issue. And the second issue is basically her going to hell to rescue her brother. And, that is what it is. And it was really great, but waiting nearly 6 months for the second part of the story is insane. And I know my comic shop, he bought heavily on the first one, and the second one, I just don't know that anybody's going to, care to pick up that second issue, especially when there's probably going to be a trade or a hardcover of this. I would assume sometime, I don't know, maybe next year, we'll see. But with all that, challenge behind, I will say this was amazing that Joe Hill does not only, obviously he created Lock and Key with Gabriel Rodriguez, but he understands the Sandman universe and that DC part of that universe. And that to me is what made this so special, is that he gets that. And he brings all that wonderful mythology of Sandman and that horror universe from DC to this story, and it's really wonderful. And of course, Gabriel Rodriguez's artwork is just absolutely stunningly gorgeous, and it's just I really enjoyed it. It's just a shame that it's taken so long. But if you hopefully maybe your comic shop still has some number ones if you didn't pick it up, or you need to find it before, trust me, you need to find it before you read the second issue, or you're going to be totally lost. But when all's said and done, it was an event that was worth waiting for, in my humble opinion. I really, really enjoyed it, and the story was really wonderful. It wraps up nicely, and it was really wonderful. And then for me, having the two, having Kelly Jones do covers for it was just even more special because he was one of the original Sandman artists. So I highly recommend it, but there is things, certain things that go with it. If you got to read 1 and 2 back to back, basically. Next up, we have Echolands Number Two, written by J.H. Williams III and W. Hayden Blackman, with artwork by J.H. Williams III. Now, what's interesting is the way that he has decided to present this book. Instead of up and down, it's all sideways. So the nice thing is that it really gives you, with his artwork, it allows the cinematic, kind of view. He can do 2 pages, like, widescreen. And it really is, I mean, obviously you're buying this for his artwork, but the question comes down to, is there a story here? Now, the first issue was really kind of a setup with the characters. So this issue is still kind of set up, but at least you get to know some of the other characters that she's with. So that's kind of a big help. But I would say we're still in the exposition part of the story. So we're still kind of learning about this world and the characters and stuff like that. So you definitely will need to have read the first issue, because it's almost like the first and second issue are like a giant first issue, I would say, story-wise, for sure. But it really is, it's kind of intriguing. I mean, it's definitely, it's one of those, here's a new world, here's new characters, stuff like, that sort of premise. And, this issue, hey, he threw pirates in, so that's kind of a win. But, it's one of those things to where I think by the next issue, I think we really need to see what's going on with the story. I mean, he's setting things up, but Williams and Blackman are setting up things really well with the story about fleshing out the characters and stuff, but we still are not quite sure what the premise of the plot is. There's clues that are being laid, but we're not quite totally sure of where it's going to go. So I think the next issue is going to be a real key issue to see where the story is going to go with this book. Once again, Williams' artwork is absolutely beautiful. It's stunning. At the very least, the story, maybe a tad not quite sure what's going on, but the artwork's gorgeous. So for that respect, I will say it's a win for that book, for the art alone. But the story is actually not too bad. I think we just need to get it going to see where it goes. Next up, we have Superman 78, number 2, written by Robert Venditti, with artwork by Wilfredo Torres. Now, I really enjoyed this. I know a lot of people were waiting for the Batman 89, but I was really waiting for Superman 78, and I will once again have to reiterate, like I said with the first issue, Venditti nails this. He understands what Richard Donner did with the 78 Superman film. And it's interesting because he's brought Brainiac into the story, and this issue we get to see Lex Luthor. So now we get to see that it definitely follows, like, Lex Luthor was, in prison, everything. Now he's out of prison. We still haven't seen Otis. So, Venditti, he better bring back Otis. That's all I got to say. But I like how he's mixing, in a way, like the comic books in the movie, in the sense that Brainiac was never in the movies, and he really wasn't in the third one. We don't talk about the third one because it's terrible. But, he definitely has a handle on that. And he also brings back one of the insane things from Superman 2, where he peels off his S and flings it at some Brainiac robots, and you're just like, it's messed up. Everybody hates that. It kind of really worked. At first, I'm like, I can't believe he did that. And then I'm like, well, okay, it's still stupid, but it kind of works in the comics. So there's that. And Torres he does a great job of capturing the actors' likenesses. It's not exact and everything, but he makes them, you can definitely tell. And of course, for me, you can imagine Christopher Reeve just saying this dialogue, and Margot Kidder and all the other actors. And it's really wonderful. It's not just nostalgic. It's actually, the story is actually quite interesting. I think Venditti using Brainiac is really kind of a smart move, because it adds something we hadn't seen from that storyline. So that, I really enjoy it, and I really recommend it. Next up, we have Amazing Fantasy number 3, written and drawn by Kyle Andrews. So the first 2 issues have set up, so we have Captain America, Black Widow, and Spider-Man on this, kind of fantasy island. And they're in different villages. And so what this issue is there's been a war brewing with the different fractions, and it all comes together in this issue where there going to be a war? Yes and no, and that's kind of the interesting thing. So in this respect, this is, it's a 5-part series. So this is definitely that middle part that is setting up that back end. So it's one of those where reading this issue, it's actually really good, the story wise, but in a way, not a lot's going on because it's taking the first half of the story and, it's that bridge to get to the second half of the story that's going to come out of what this war, whatever happens. So that's where the story is going. And once again, Andrew's artwork is absolutely phenomenal. This is a gorgeous looking book. And the story has actually been a lot of fun. Even, like I said, this third issue, it's a bridge, but it really is a good story. And you can definitely tell, he's leading up to something, and I'm really excited to see where he takes the story and the characters from here, because he's done a really great job of setting up this thing. Now we're getting to the point where it's going to be a payoff. So it's going to be very exciting. I still really recommend this book. Both great story and gorgeous artwork. Next up, we have Wonder Woman Black and Gold, number 4. Okay, so in this issue, we have stories written by Andrew Constant, with artwork by Nicola Scott. And then we have a story written and drawn by Paul Azita. Then we have a story written by Sienna Grace with artwork by Leonardo Romero. Then we have a story that's written and drawn by Andrew McLean. And the final story is written by Sherry L. Smith with artwork by Colleen Duran. Now, this, I have been a huge fan of these short story books, and I love how they get different teams and different creators that are way outside, like the, normal superhero style and feel of stories. And, once again, this issue is just packed with just really wonderful stuff. The Constant Scott one is really, really nice and very, very touching, because it's about, helping a creature go on to the next life. Basically, that's the basic story, and it really is beautiful. And Scott's art is she is just a really fabulous artist. The really one of my favorite ones was the story Amazing by Paul Azita, that is about these kids who are, the girls dressed up as Batman, but then you see Wonder Woman fighting Giganta, and it really, they come crashing the building, and it's a really adorable story with a really heartfelt message, and the artwork is wonderful. I love his artwork. But probably one of my absolute favorite ones was the one by Sienna Grace and Leo Romero, that is really, really just, you don't realize it until the end. I don't want to give away the end, but it's about Wonder Woman and a friend of hers, and she's dying of cancer, and she has found a way not to cure the cancer, but to stop it, because she wants more time. And it's interesting because, in a way, we all want more time, and that story is so heartfelt and so emotionally amazing, and the artwork is just absolutely just wonderful and just fits that story like a glove. That is really an amazing story, and it was really, really wonderful. And then Andrew McLean's story was actually really interesting, because it's about Wonder Woman kind of fighting a cult, and it really just it's very interesting. It was one of those. A part of it was the style of the artwork was really intriguing. I really like that story because it was kind of really thought provoking and everything, because it deals with emotions and how you want to be part of something and everything, and it was really interesting. And then the last story by Smith and Duran was really, really just. It was about a female pilots during World War II, but they had planes and they couldn't they didn't have ammo or anything. They did reconnaissance and stuff. And she gets attacked, and Wonder Woman and the Invisible Jet come. And it's really a wonderful story, and Duran's artwork is just absolutely gorgeous. I really highly recommend these books because they're great short stories. You can just read it by itself. It's one and done. You know, you don't have to, if you missed any of the other issues, it's fine. You can just pick this one up and go. And I love, it's just like the Superman Red and Blue, how these creators are doing really emotional, really heartfelt stories that really get to the core of what Wonder Woman really is, and they're just absolutely wonderful. It's really highly recommended. Next up, we have Batman Reptilian number four. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. So now we finally find out that it was alluded to that Killer Croc basically gave birth to this monster. So it's been hinted, and you know, and we kind of knew that it was coming. So this issue deals with that whole thing. So Batman actually finds Killer Croc and kind of puts all the pieces of the puzzle together. But now what's going to be interesting from this point forward is how is it all going to flesh out? Because this monster, I mean, Killer Croc can usually beat the crap out of Batman pretty well. So now we have a creature that could basically probably snap Killer Croc in half, theoretically. And you know, how are they going to defeat it, or you know, what are they going to do? So that's what this issue really deals with, is the aftermath of like the birth, and how all these pieces of the puzzle are now finally starting to you can start seeing how things are coming together, and it's really interesting. And this story is really intriguing. I really love it. And then of course, the biggest win is Liam Sharp's artwork, which is absolutely stunning. He's painting this artwork. It's absolutely gorgeous. There's one page, and I'll put it up here, that is just absolutely just the layout, the way it's drawn. It's just, it really shows how great of an artist Liam Sharp is. I really, really love this book. I really enjoy it. It's very outside, you know, the typical Batman story. That's what's great about it. And then you have Liam Sharp's painted artwork, which is just like, you know, icing on the cake on this one. And I really have been enjoying this book, so I really recommend it. Next up, we have crossover number 8, written by Donny Cates with Jeff Shaw. So the last issue, 7, was somewhat of a fill-in. It was written by Chip Zdarsky, and it was about Chip Zdarsky meeting the cartoon, or, you know, the comic book version of Chip Zdarsky. So this issue gets back to the main story. Now that issue, that fill-in issue, does affect, you know, the story. It's part of the story. It's part of that universe. But now we've learned that, you know, the dome has been breached. The characters, you know, the worlds are now not separated out. And so we also have learned that the main girl is also, she was in the dome, but she is a comic book character. So now we're seeing the ramifications of all that coming to fruition. And it's really interesting. I've been a really big fan of this book, and I try not to give too much of the story away, because there's really a lot that is dealt with in this issue. But if you haven't been reading this book, I know there's a trade of the first 6 issues. You don't necessarily need to read the 7th issue. You can jump kind of straight to the 8th issue. But if you haven't been reading, I really recommend getting the trade, and I really enjoy this book. Donny Cates is just really knocking it out of the park. I really like how he's, you know, kind of bending, like, you know, real world and comic book world, and he's kind of just putting it all together and then throwing it in a blender pretty much. And Shaw's artwork is just really, really wonderful. I really enjoy this. And I love how we keep, you know, this issue, we have Powers characters show up. So we, you know, there's definitely a lot more characters that are going to be coming into this book. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this keeps going forward, because it's been a really great ride so far. So I'm excited. I really love this issue, and excited to see where it goes. Next up, we have Batman: The Adventures Continues, Season 2, number 4. Written by Alan Burnett and Paul Dini, with artwork by Jordan Gibson. Now, this continues being like Batman the Animated Series, so this is a standalone issue. This is kind of Renee Montoya storyline, or single issue. It really centers around her character, and what it is the mob's basically hired a killer to bump her off. That's the basic premise. But once again, you have Denny and Burnett. They know this series, or they know the animated series like the back of their hand because they both wrote for it. And I did like Gibson's artwork. He did a really nice job, captures the style and everything. It's a good story, and it's a standalone. If you haven't been reading this, you could actually this issue does stand on its own, so you could definitely pick it up. And I really enjoyed it. If you're a fan of Batman the Animated Series, you should definitely be buying this book. Next up, we have The Marvels number 5, written by Kurt Bissett, with artwork by Yerdere Sinar. So once again, this is very similar to like Amazing Fantasy. This 5th issue is kind of a bridge story of what has happened in the first 4 issues and bridging it to come to the finale of this story. So there's not, in a way, a lot going on in this issue. It's kind of like you're dealing with the ramifications of the dome that's over Asia, and now these monsters have hatched from eggs. So we're kind of seeing the ramifications of the story that Bissett has set up in the first 4 issues. So it's kind of opening up here. So if it's one of those things, if you haven't been reading the book, I don't know what to say, because you're really going to be lost. But if you have been reading the book, I really, or interested, I would definitely, I like this, because it's, at first I thought it was going to be like Marvel's, where it's kind of the real world reaction to like superheroes, like if we could go see them out in the streets and stuff. But this is really a very different type of story. It's more of a superhero based, how it's kind of told from their point of view, but in the real world. So that's where this story kind of is, and that's how he's mixing these two worlds. And Sinar's artwork, I really have been a really big fan. He's new to me on this, but he's really doing a wonderful job. And there's a lot, he's drawn a lot of characters, and he's balancing out really, really well. So I really enjoy it. And I think this book is well worth checking out. So next up, we have The Good Asian number 5, written by Pornsak Pinchot, with artwork by Alexandra Turnevsky. Now, so the first 4 issues was the kind of the first story arc. This is a bridge to the next story arc. But what this is kind of a flashback, a story that with Edison, who's the Asian detective, and his adopted brother and sister Frankie and Victoria. So it has to do with, we knew that he was adopted by their father, Frankie and Victoria's father. But this issue, I love that Pichot actually opens this up, because we actually learn so much about these characters. We also learn how Edison got the scar on his face, and that, Victoria actually plays a really important part, and it will be interesting to see how she fits into the story, because we really haven't seen her a lot in the first story arcs. But with what we know from this issue that takes, the story that takes place in the past, I think she's going to be a big key player in going forward. So it'll be really interesting, but it really ties together the story of the 3 kids and how they all kind of connect and interact with each other. And going forward, I think it's going to be really interesting. I've been a big fan of this book. There is a trade of the first 4 issues that's out now. So if you haven't been buying it, you could get the trade and pick up the 5th issue, because this is a really good book. It really is just firing on all cylinders. It's really wonderful. And not only is the story great, but Turnevsky's artwork really, really just brings it all together, really captures the mood and the feel. And in this issue, especially, with being set in the past, this is that the way he draws the story is very intriguing, because it kind of has the artwork's similar, but it has a different feel, which is a really smart move, because then you notice, like, there's parts that are in the present where he's talking to somebody, and then so he's able to kind of visually differentiate the two, which is really a smart move, and it really adds a lot to the story. I'm really enjoying the book once again, highly recommended. Next up, we have Brzrkr number 5, written by Keanu Reeves and Matt Kindt, with artwork by Ron Garney. So this fifth issue, we now, once again, we kind of go into the past, and what this particular story centers on is, we know he's immortal. He cannot be killed. We know that. So how do you live all these years and not fall in love? And guess what? He does, and he finds out very quickly that is the most painful thing, because he can't die. So, I mean, he could probably get hurt, and it probably hurts when his arm gets cut off, but ultimately he doesn't die. He always comes back to life. But how do you can't fix a broken heart? And that is what the story is. And I have to give Reeves and Kent, this really opens up a lot more about the character, that it's more than just, he's a killing machine, that he really, it's how do you not fall in love? You can't. And that's what this story, that's what's interesting about the story. Then we also learn in this story that his psychiatrist, maybe there is something, she's working on that we all don't quite know, that she may be working for either the government or some other agency. We're not sure, but that opens up a whole can of worms in this issue. And once again, I enjoy Ron Garney's artwork. He's an old school Marvel artist, and he's doing a really bang up job here. And it's a fun book, but I have to admit, it's gotten better because they're actually, dealing with the story of him, and his past, and how the past, goes into the present and the future. So it's really been a surprisingly good book. So I think you should check it out. And once again, there's a trade that came out of the first 4 issues, and you can pick up the 5th issue. And finally, this week we have Batman Superman number 22, written by Jean Luen Yang, with pencil artwork by Paul Peltier and inking by Keith Champagne. So this issue is a great follow-up to the movie storyline, because it involves Mr. Mixelplex and Calendar Man. So Mr. Mixelplex comes to Calendar Man and gives him a magical hat that allows him to break the 4th dimension of a comic book. He actually can go from panel to panel, and he can look in the panels, like he sees on the next page that Bruce Wayne is Batman. So he'd like, wait a second, Bruce Wayne's Batman. So he goes to other villains and says, hey, guess what? I know Bruce Wayne's Batman. They're like, you're crazy. That's internet gossip, So I have to really, once again, Yang is really just nailing this book. He's having a good time, and he's creating these wild stories in a way they're almost like classic old world finest, where those were kind of dopey and everything, but where like on the covers you have Superman and Batman and Robin on like a teeter-totter, and you're just like, well, this makes no sense. But Yang has done an interesting thing. He basically takes this insane idea of breaking the 4th wall in a comic book, which is very not easy to do, and he does it really well, I have to say. But it gives it like something unique. It's not just another, Batman Superman team up, and that's what's making this book really, really a lot of fun. And then, Peltier and Champagne deliver really nice artwork, and they have a really hard thing to do, because they have to, like, he'll look through panels and stuff. You have to really think about that and how it's all going to come together and everything. And I really handed off to them that they did a really great job of bringing Yang's life, a story to life here. And it was really good. So that's going to do it for this week's comics. Quite a few. We got through them pretty quick. Once again, as a public service announcement, I get all my comics at Pulp Fiction Comics in Long Beach, California. Ryan runs an amazing store, and Annie and Eduardo are awesome. And it's a great store. They offer a great pull service. They offer discounts on new graphic novels and catalog stuff. And they also have a sister store that's run by Chris and her team in Culver City, Pulp Fiction Culver City. They're separate stores, but they have the same name. Both really good stores. Chris runs a great store up there. And please, please, please get vaccinated. Be safe out there. Take care of yourselves. Stay healthy. Mask up when you can. Just be really careful out there. Things are getting a little bit better, but still, please be safe out there. And we'll end the show like we always do. Please be kind. Kindness goes a long way. Kindness is free. Be kind to each other. Be kind to everyone. It doesn't cost anything to be kind, and being kind can really make somebody's day. So that's going to do it for this week. I'm Steven from popculturemaven.com, and take care of yourselves, and remember, be kind. Thanks a lot. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.